Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So I'm breaking down the Thursday Night Football Showdown slate for tonight on Draftkings. We have a divisional matchup here between the Colts and the Titans in what should be a decent game. I don't think it's going to be the best game in the world, but I don't think it's going to be the worst game in the world either. Just a nice, solid, decent game. We have some fun players to watch in Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown. And overall, I'm just excited for the game, and I'm sure you guys are as well. I'm just happy we have football on a Thursday night, so no complaints from me. But if you find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. And without further ado, let's dive right into it. And as always, we'll start at the quarterback position, and up top, we have a very pricey Ryan Tannehill at $11,200. Now, my first impression on that is that he may be a bit overpriced, but again, it's a showdown slate, guys, so obviously I'm going to have interest in both quarterbacks. They offer us the highest floors. They have the ball in their hands each and every single play, which you can't say about any other player besides the center, but we're not playing centers in DFS, so definitely have interest in both these quarterbacks. Now, the matchup for Ryan Tannehill, it's not a good one. That'll make it like 3 out of the past 4 weeks where he's had some tough matchups. He's faced Pittsburgh, Chicago, since he's a soft matchup, and now he's facing the Colts, which they've been pretty stingy versus the past this season. They're actually allowing the second fewest points per game to quarterbacks in their 5th DVOA overall versus the past. So this shouldn't be a cakewalk for Ryan Tannehill, but I do like him here. He's playing at home. Now, they are 1-point dogs, which doesn't really mean too much. It's not like they're going to be like trailing in this game. It would not surprise me if the Titans won, but I do think he's a good option. I know that's easy to say because it's Ryan Tannehill I think he's the most expensive player on this slate, and he's a quarterback. But yeah, I'm going to try to find a way to fit in both quarterbacks here. I think they're both good options. It's just Ryan Tannehill does have a really tough matchup, but overall, I think he'll be fine enough to get the job done on a showdown slate. And if you're playing cash games, you're going to want to get him in. Then Phillip Rivers, $9,800. He's a little bit more affordable here, and the Tennessee Titans defense has definitely not been great this year. Now, they did get some help in the secondary because they did add Desmond King, but overall, it's still not the greatest defense in the world. And if you're looking at their overall numbers this season, they're 24th DVA versus the pass, and they're 23rd versus quarterbacks, allowing 22 Draftkings points per game and close to 300 passing yards per game as well. Now, Phillip Rivers, he's definitely not one of my favorite rosters in the world, but he is averaging 260 passing yards per game, but barely over a passing touchdown per game, but throwing the ball 34 times, and has close to a 70% completion percentage. It's not pretty with Phillip Rivers these days, but again, he's only $9,800 and a good matchup on a showdown slate, so I'm definitely going to have some interest in Phillip here. And he's actually had a couple of decent games mixed in this year, so maybe we get one of those and it'll definitely work out, but I expect him to be pretty popular, and if you're playing cash games or just one lineup, I'd really try to get both of these guys in, and I really do like that price for Phillip Rivers. Now we move on to the running back position, which besides Derrick Henry, it's a bit messy because the Colts situation is just, man, good luck picking which one's going to score the most points. But we'll start up top with the obvious option in Derrick Henry at $10,800. Matchup versus the Colts, it's definitely not great. They are second DVA versus the run, allowing the 3rd fewest points per game to running backs, but definitely a very tough matchup versus Derrick Henry. This is one of the highest volume running backs we're going to see. He's also an absolute, he's just a menace to tackle. I don't know, I'm trying to find the right word here, but the guy's huge. He runs very fast, and it's definitely hard to tackle him, especially as the game goes on. And we're getting later into the season where Derrick Henry historically always plays better the later in the season we go. And we're in week 10, which sounds crazy, but it's mid-November, and might be time for Derrick Henry just to come out here and start destroying defenses, but averaging nearly 23 rushing attempts per game this year, a rushing touchdown per game, over 100 rushing yards per game. Not really a threat in the passing game, only 7.5% target share and slightly less than 2 targets per game, but you don't really need him to do damage in the passing game just for him to pay off, because what he can do on the ground is just absolutely exceptional, and it would not surprise me if it goes for 100 plus yards and doesn't get into the end zone once or twice. So I'm definitely in on Derrick Henry here, one of my more priorities on this slate, just because it's a showdown slate, and I want to lock in the high-volume guy, and I would be surprised if anyone's going to get more touches than Derrick Henry in this game. And then after Henry, it gets a bit messy here because we have the three-headed monster of Jonathan Taylor, Nyheim Hines, and Jordan Wilkins, and it's a messy situation here. We thought, like in week 2, that Jonathan Taylor was just going to take the league by storm. Not really, but be one of the better running backs in the league, especially since Marlon Mack went down. He was going to just have a stronghold as the main primary running back on this team. That just really has not been the case. Jordan Wilkins has been involved the past few weeks, and then you have Nyheim Hines as well. It's just a bit of a messy situation here, and if I'm building one lineup, I would feel pretty good about not playing any of these guys, because I'd rather just spend that on a wide receiver, because, I mean, good luck projecting this. Like if we're looking at the snap counts last week, Jordan Wilkins and Nyheim Hines both played 34% of the snaps. Now you got to keep in mind they were trailing in that game, but still, I mean, and then Jonathan Taylor had the least amount of snaps at 31%. So it's just a bit of a tricky situation there. Overall, I would say if I had to pick one and salary wasn't an issue, I would say Jonathan Taylor. But Nyheim Hines, he's going to be involved through the air. It's not like a crazy amount of numbers if we're looking at or a crazy number, I should say. He's only got a 12% target share on the season and just slightly over 4 targets per game, although that's valuable in a PPR format like Draftkings. It's not like he's cheap. You're paying $6,200 for him, so even then, it doesn't get me too excited. He's only running the ball 4 times per game. Jonathan Taylor, I would expect him to get the most touches in this backfield, but even then, Jordan Wilkins will probably be right up there with Jonathan Taylor, and you can get him at about a $3,000 discount, so if they're going to just give a similar workload, why not take Wilkins at $5,400? Do I think Wilkins is as good as Taylor? Probably not, but it doesn't really matter to me because he's just going to get similar volume. That's really all I care about. And it's a decent matchup versus the Titans. They are 15th DVA versus the run, but they're 21st versus running backs, allowing 25.3 DraftKings points per game and nearly 100 rushing yards per game as well. So, I mean, it's just a situation I would probably avoid for the most part, but if you're playing tournaments, building 150 lineups, yeah, you're going to want exposure to all of these guys, but Wilkins is the cheapest, so I guess that would make me slightly lean his way. But overall, it's just a sucky situation from a DFS perspective. Now, the only guy I want to talk about besides the 3 Colts running backs and Derrick Henry would be Jerry McNichols at $200, the backup running back for the Tennessee Titans. He actually played around 30% of the snaps last week. Now, the touches are going to be very limited for this guy. He's averaging less than 3 rushing attempts per game and about a half a target per game. But he's only $200, and if he gets like 5 touches in this game, that might be enough to pay off at $200. It's going to allow you to fit in the 2 quarterbacks, Derrick Henry, potentially A.J. Brown, so I don't hate the idea of using Jeremy McNichols. I mean, overall, it's just not, you can't really make a great case for him besides the price point, because this is a terrible matchup versus the Colts, and Derrick Henry is going to dominate the touches in this backfield, but if he can get a handful of touches at $200, maybe he catches a pass, it's not that bad at only $200, and it can certainly open up your lineup, and after that, I wouldn't really even think about using any of those other running backs listed there. Then we move on to the wide receiver position, and up top we have A.J. Brown at $10,400. He's easily the best wide receiver in this game, and he had an amazing catch last week versus the Bears. If you did not see that yet, go on YouTube right now or Twitter, look up A.J. Brown's touchdown catch versus the Bears. It was absolutely awesome. And the guy's just been a touchdown scoring machine. I think he's scored in all but 1 game this season. He's actually averaging a touchdown per game, 25.5% target share, 32% market share of the team's air yards, and overall, some very good numbers. The guy's a very talented wide receiver, definitely going to be a stud for years to come. But the matchup versus the Colts, like it is with Ryan Tannehill, it's a tough one for sure. I mean, the Colts defense has been very stingy just overall versus running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, quarterbacks, you name it. They've been pretty tough, and they're only allowing the 8th fewest points per game to wide receivers, and they're 5th DVA versus the pass. So don't love the matchup, and if this was a main slate with like 10 or 11 games, I'm probably not even thinking about going A.J. Brown here. But since it's the showdown slate, you can certainly break open the slate, and it would not surprise me if he gets 100-plus yards and a touchdown. So I'll have interest, but if I had to decide between A.J. Brown or Derrick Henry, I'll side with the higher volume in Derrick Henry. But if you can fit both, great. But if I had to pick one, I'm going to side with Derrick Henry just because I know we're going to get 20-plus touches for the most part. And then dropping down to Corey Davis, the wide receiver 2 on that team, saving $100. Now, he completely blanked last week, got you absolutely nothing, which was very surprising because besides that game, he's been very good all season long. He hasn't scored less than double digits, 29.8 points the week prior to that, 15.5, 11.9, 12.6, and 20.1. So I think people, if you're just walking at game logs, they're probably going to be off Corey Davis a little bit just because he goosed you last week, but I'd have really no issues with that. I think he should have a fine game here. He's not going to blank you once again. He's been involved in this offense. Adam Humphries is also going to be out, so I know it really doesn't change too much, but it's just a guy down for them. I know he didn't play last week, but it's still just extra targets to go around in this offense, and obviously Ryan Tannehill's been having a good he's been good since week 7 last year. I was going to say good season, which he is having a good season, but since last year, since week 7, he's been playing exceptionally well. And Corey Davis is getting about 7 targets per game, which is only just a little bit lower than A.J. Brown. Now, he's not nearly as good as A.J. Brown, but don't forget this guy was a former first-round pick, and he's certainly been playing good this season. Close to a 25% target share. Overall, like, nearly similar numbers to A.J. Brown. Now, he is not the physical talent that A.J. Brown is, but Corey Davis is still a pretty good wide receiver, and he should see the softer coverage between A.J. Brown, or between all the wide receivers, because A.J. Brown is certainly going to garner some heavy heavy attention from the defense, but like I mentioned, just with A.J. Brown, it's a tough matchup versus the Colts, but we're going to be forced to play these guys since the showdown slate. That could definitely get down with some Corey Davis, because if you can't spend top dollar for A.J. Brown, I think Corey Davis is a fine consolation prize. Then we get into some of the Colts wide receivers, actually 3 in a row here in Zach Pascal, T.Y. Hilton, and Marcus Johnson, and to be honest, I don't really love any of these guys. T.Y. Hilton would be my favorite because he's going to be good to go, and he's only $1,500, and he was out last week. But I actually do think he's a pretty solid play in this slate just because he's only $5,800. Now, I know the Titans did add Desmond King to their secondary, but he's the guy that pretty much plays in the slot, so he's not going to be glued to T.Y. Hilton all game long. And only $5,800, I mean, I think we'll take it. Now, he's not been good at all this season. He only has one game above double-digit points, and that was 12.9 points versus Cleveland in Week 5. Outside of that, he has not been good in the slightest, but again, it's a showdown slate. The price is nice. This has been a pretty rough defense overall this season versus the past. They're actually allowing the second most points per game to wide receivers at 48 points per game, over 200 receiving yards per game, and over a receiving touchdown per game as well, and they're 24th DVA versus the pass. Again, they're going to get some help with Desmond King, but it's not like T.Y. Hilton's going to play 100% of his routes going up against Desmond King. So I think T.Y. Hilton's fine at $5,800. He'd be a nice pairing with Phillip Rivers, and the price is just kind of in a sweet spot where he's not super expensive, but he's not like super cheap. He's just a really nice mid-range option. And then I mean, really, all these other guys, I'm not super interested in any of them. It's a really good matchup, but there's just a lot of guys here. I mean, you got Pittman, Johnson, Pascal. Now, Pascal, he plays a lot of his he plays a lot of his snaps in the slot. As you can see, 72% of his snaps have been in the slot this season, which is going to be right with Desmond King. So, and he's also the most expensive Colts wide receiver. So I totally understand if you don't want to play any Pascal because it's a tough spot there versus King. And then after that, so just to kind of wrap that up a little bit. Out of all the Colts wide receivers, I prefer T.Y. Hilton the most. You can sprinkle in the other guys because it's a good matchup, but overall, I'm kind of just keyed in on T.Y. Hilton there. Then after that, obviously Paris Campbell is going to be out, but since there's not going to be any Adam Humphries once again, we could look at Khalif Raymond and Batson from the Tennessee Titans. Now they both played around 25% of snaps last week. Batson is free at $200, so I think that would be a fine just dart throw. But these guys definitely aren't focal points of this offense. It's going to flow through Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, and Corey Davis for the most part. I mean, these guys might be lucky to get a couple of targets here or there, which they're super cheap in a showdown slate. I don't mind taking some shots with them. But just, I mean, really out of all these cheap guys, it would be Raymond and Batson for me. And with that being said, we'll move on to the tight end position. And up top, we have Jonnu Smith at $7,000. Now, he started off the year pretty hot. That has cooled off a little bit, but he did catch a touchdown last week. He only caught 2 balls, but since it was a touchdown, it definitely worked out for him. But the Colts, man, they've just been super stingy versus all these positions, like quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. They're not giving up many points per game this year. And they're actually giving up the second fewest points per game to tight ends, only 36 receiving yards allowed per game, 0 receiving touchdowns to tight ends all season long, only 7.6 Draftkings points per game. It's just a really tough matchup here. Now, Jonnu Smith, he's on the field pretty much the entire game, played over 90% of the snaps last week. But, man, if you're going to play a Titans tight end, I almost feel like just paying only $2,200 for Anthony Ferguson, who's actually been having similar production the past few weeks. So that might be the way to go. I think Jonnu Smith's a bit overpriced there, and it is a tough matchup. But, man, so showdown slate, I think he's a nice contrarian option, but I'd rather allocate my funds to wide receivers, running backs, and quarterbacks than spending it for a tight end on this slate. Trey Burton at $5,600. Jack Doyle is going to be out for this game. You also have Mo Cox questionable. Now, it sounds like he's going to be good to go, but Trey Burton, as he has been the past, whatever it's been, 5-6 weeks, whatever, he should operate as the tight end 1 in this offense. And if Mo Cox happens to be out, he's going to be the only tight end there, so he'd actually be a pretty solid play. But I'd imagine Mo Cox is going to play, so that would just be a split between those guys. But Burton, I wouldn't say he's playing fantastic. He has been scoring some touchdowns here and there, but only had about 1 point last week, less than 4.5 targets per game, 3 catches per game, only 24 receiving yards. These numbers are not super impressive. A 13% target share. And the matchup versus the Titans, overall, they have struggled in the secondary this season, allowing 13.9 DraftKings points per game to tight ends. They suck versus wide receivers as well, just overall not the best defense in the world. But Trey Burton is a very uninspiring play, but if you have 5,600 left in your lineup and you only have Trey Burton left, I think that's okay, but I'm not excited about it. Mo Cox, he would just be a tournament pivot off of Burton if he's good to go. I assume he's going to be good to go, but there's definitely upside there with him. We know Phillip Rivers isn't shy to throw it to his tight ends. And just to mention, the guy is absolutely enormous, so there's always some touchdown upside there as well. But Anthony Ferguson at $2,200, I actually think he's a pretty interesting play here because he's actually been decent. And by decent, I mean relative to his price tag. It's not like I'm expecting Jonnu Smith numbers from him, but he's been involved in the offense. 4.9 points last week, 5.6, 2.7. Had that huge game versus Houston week 6 where he had 28.3 points, had over 100 receiving yards. But he's been getting targets, 6 targets last week, 3, 2, 9, 5. I'm not expecting a huge game from Anthony Firkser, but I don't know. I always have a hard time saying his name. Firkser. But at $2,200, you don't need much. If he happens to score a touchdown, you'll be pretty happy with him. And I can definitely see him doing better on a point per dollar basis than point per dollar basis than Jonnu Smith in this game. I think both are fine, but you can give me about a $5,000 discount with Firkser, who can probably have a somewhat similar game, assuming Jonnu Smith doesn't catch 2 or 3 touchdowns in this one. And then after that, Jack Doyle, he's going to be out, and I can't really recommend playing anybody else. So Firkser would be the lowest I would go at the tight end position, but I do think he's a pretty decent value play. Then the defenses, I think both are playable, but I'm not super excited about either one of them. Like the Colts, they've had a good defense this year, but then again, the Titans, I imagine I'm going to have a lot of Titans in my lineup. Like I want to play Derrick Henry, Tannehill, A.J. Brown, Corey Davis. I want to play one of their tight ends, so I'm not super excited about playing the Colts defense, even though they have played well this season. And they are 1-point favorites, but they're also on the road, and they have a 23.75 implied team total against them, which isn't super light. It's not like super high where it's got like a 30-plus point total against them, but I'm not really excited about either of these defenses. The Titans, they just haven't had that great of a defense this year, but they're going to be against Phillip Rivers, who's obviously he's pretty washed these days, so I wouldn't be too concerned about the Colts putting up a boatload of points, but I'm not like super interested in either of these defenses, but they're fine mid-range plays just because I don't think this game's going to be an absolute shootout. And the kickers, they are what they are: Rodrigo Blankenship and Steven Gostkowski. I can't really good luck projecting these guys. If they hit their field goals, they hit their field goals and they become fine value plays. But if they don't, they just kick extra points, so they just don't get in kicking opportunities. They're not going to pay off. But I could see this game going where the offenses move the ball a little bit, but they just don't score a ton of touchdowns, which means it could be a big field goal game. But outside of that, they're just fine last piece fits if you have around $4,000 left in your lineup. And with that being said, guys, I'm going to get out of here. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, make sure to leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out. I really do appreciate that. If you want to support the channel over on Patreon, you can do that in the link down in the description below. You get access into the entire DFS data sheet that I post for the showdown slates and the main slates. And you can hop to the Discord chat as well. If you want to follow me over on social media, handles in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. And I'm going to get out of here, guys. I'll see you guys in the next one. If you want to check out my favorite studs video, I posted that. Well, I'm recording this video at 12 in the morning, so it would be, I guess it would still be yesterday for you guys. So I posted that yesterday evening if you want to check that out. I also did my first look video on Tuesday. Then I'll do my favorite mid-range plays and value plays either today when you're watching this, later this evening, or on Friday morning/afternoon. Then we'll do the lineup building video and the core plays video later on. So, all right, before I keep talking, I'm going to get out of here. Hope you guys enjoy the game tonight, and hope you have a fantastic rest of your week.